Okay, welcome to tonight's Thriving with Type 1 Diabetes. This is just going to be our story and things that I've learned from other people who have walked this road for decades before us and the way that we've been doing it. And so I hope that it's helpful to you, because I really just want to get the message across that we can truly live differently than what they tell us when we have type 1 diabetes in the family. So a little bit about us before we jump into how we're doing things. My name is Sarah Gentiloni. I have been the founder and running this Healthy Families for God for over a decade. And we have been living a very healthy, holistic lifestyle for about 20 years. And that was 15 years before my son was diagnosed with type 1. I have 6 children. They're all, they're healthy. We've taken a lot of journeys on learning how to heal them and work through health issues over the last 20 plus years. And some of that inspired me to not just start Healthy Families for God as I was learning, but also to go to school. So I originally started out as a certified nutrition counselor, and I was writing a newsletter for a doctor and doing some other freelance writing. And then I started this blog, Healthy Families for God, and started it at 0. And now on Facebook, we're over 60,000 people, and some on Instagram. And it's just been a joy to share our journey with everybody. So I'm just going to share authentically what we're doing. I'm not giving medical advice. I'm not going to give doses and recommendations. I'm just going to share with you the information that we learned in order to get the results that we're getting and just really thrive truly with type 1 diabetes. So you can see my son was in very bad shape upon diagnosis. It was completely out of the blue and completely unexpected. We were, like I said, living a very healthy, holistic lifestyle. This son, along with some of my other kids, had never had McDonald's in their life. We hadn't been eating sugar. We hadn't been eating a lot of things. I made everything homemade. And when I say everything, I mean everything. And, so we use natural things for everything. And so this was a very unexpected diagnosis. We thought he had the flu, and some of you might be able to relate to that. And it just started progressing really fast. And part of that was probably because sometimes what we did before knowing better when the kids were sick was giving them freshly juiced vegetables and fruit. And as you can imagine, that definitely made the issue worse that we didn't know at the time was type 1 diabetes. So he was admitted to the hospital with a blood sugar over 600, and his body was shutting down. So he was in bad shape for a while, but his heart stopped, he coded, all of this stuff. We went through a lot of really scary things during it, but here we are, we're thriving. So this picture in the middle is one of the first pictures of us going grocery shopping after diagnosis. And even though we had been eating so healthy for so long, we knew that we had to make some shifts. So we were just digging into the information that we could find that I knew would work just based on what I had already known and what we had already eaten. And so we tackled it head on. One of the things that was unexpected for me through this was that I learned to heal myself through all of this too. I began wearing a continuous glucose monitor as well, and learning about adrenal fatigue and how blood sugar and insulin and all of that comes into play with it, and unexpectedly lost some stress weight that I had and healed some other issues that I had too. So it's been a really incredible journey of learning. And one of the things that a lot of people ask me, aside from all of this, just with the platform that I have and the clients that I have, is how did you learn what you learned to help people, and where did you go to school? And I can tell you where I went to school. I can tell you, that I did the naturopathic doctor program at Trinity and these other programs and things like that. But I will tell you that the area where I am able to help myself, my family, and other people the most is just by walking this journey and climbing this mountain that we've been given to climb and to show others how to climb. So that may be your story as well. So here's just a little quick snippet of just some numbers for Gabe. His blood sugar is really boring. As you know, with type 1 diabetes, the only, what do they say? The only constant is that, there's never anything constant. But I will tell you that, at first I shared a lot of his graphs because I was so amazed at how stable they could be, and just steady they looked. And then I just stopped sharing so often because it was just boring. They just really were the same all of the time. And so we quickly got his A1C down after diagnosis, which, can happen just by using insulin. But I knew at the hospital something wasn't right when he would be given the mealtime amount and we would have to learn how to calculate it. And it never worked to get his blood sugar in the range that I knew was healthy. And some people don't know what a healthy range is or what a normal person's blood sugar looks like until they start watching type 1, and then they don't really have it to compare to. And probably similarly to me, a lot of people mistakenly think that when you have a working pancreas that's producing adequate insulin and your body is sensitive to that insulin, that your blood sugar is going to look like this on the left as well. And that's not the case. And what I learned was that most people without diabetes even are still having massive blood sugar spikes and drops. And they just don't realize that's going on because they're not wearing these continuous glucose monitors. And so we've had a lot of people in the last 4.5 years who have woken up to this and have been wearing continuous glucose monitors and realizing they don't have diabetes. Their labs look great. Their A1C looks great, but they are having massive spikes and drops from everyday foods that kids and adults are eating every day. So I think that, one of the things we need to do is understand what a normal person's blood sugar looks like. And when I say normal, I mean, what is that ideal, not common? It is helpful to see what a person in America's blood sugar looks like throughout the day commonly. And, we can see that that's not working for people. And so we can say we can just eat all of the standard American foods with type 1 diabetes and just dose for it. But if we can't, if the body in the way that it was created cannot make insulin and produce it in a way that matches what we're eating, because you can have a Pop-Tart and it will spike blood sugar if you don't have diabetes. And then the insulin that your body will pump in will all of a sudden drop that blood sugar. And you'll have this spike and this drop, this reactive hypoglycemia. People wondering why they all of a sudden feel hungry half an hour after they ate a Pop-Tart or drink a soda or something. So there's not, it's almost crazy to me to think that we can match with injected insulin what the body can't even do with its own insulin. So that's something that really stood out to me. How can we expect to get that result when the body created perfectly with its own insulin can't even do that and keep up with these things that we're calling foods? So just a little bit about his A1C. We have all these years, 2021 was diagnosis, and early 2021, the last blood sugar we checked, all of these years, he was going through hormone teenage stuff. So he was 15 at diagnosis, he's 19 now. And so, I know that hormones play a role in it, and I know that they can make it tougher, as can other things, but I'm telling you that I really believe that we can still achieve some great blood sugars and have it be just a background noise instead of just dictating our everyday life. So this says only about 1 in 1,000 people with type 1 diabetes achieve and maintain a healthy non-diabetic A1C. Yet we see this result over and over in those following Dr. Bernstein's low-carb, high-protein approach, including children with type 1. Now, you may have heard of that. You may have a lot of myths or misguided notions about it, or just questions and curiosity about it. And I'm going to share some of that tonight. I want to say that the low carb, high protein is not the only thing that we do. It is a main thing. And there's some things that you need to know around it because it has to be done in a different way than what many of us would think. We're taught that protein is kind of a free food, that you don't have to dose insulin for it and stuff. And that's not the case. So I'm going to share a little bit about what we do for food. The first thing I did when he was diagnosed was we were sitting in the hospital room in the NICU, or not the NICU, the ICU, the pediatric intensive care unit. And he, I just was sensing that this wasn't the way to do it. They're telling me he needs to have at least this many carbs. And so we're going to make sure we're going to fill in that gap, because you only have, 10 grams of carbs with this meal, because that's just the way we were eating already. And so you need to fill it in with a banana. And so then we're going to calculate this dosage, and we're going to do a correction amount plus for his meal. And then, 2 hours later, he's in the 200s. And I'm thinking, this just doesn't seem right. So, do what you want with that. I will say that my son has grown extremely well. I charted his weight and his growth over the last 4 years, and all of the doctors have been very happy with that, and that has been on the low carb, high protein approach. So I know that everybody is different, but I have seen myself, my son, and other kids with type 1 diabetes grow extremely well on this very nutrient dense diet. A couple of things I want to clear up before we talk about how we eat is we do not avoid carbs. So a lot of people say you need carbs to grow, and you need carbs for fiber, and you need this. Yes. This isn't about, for us, avoiding carbs. He actually has some really great things for carbs, but low carb can mean many different things. Low carb is a very subjective term. So I've seen people call their diet low carb, and they're eating more carbs than I would eat in a day. For me personally, without type 1, people have a low carb diet that looks a lot more like a keto diet. And then there's so many variations in the keto diet too. So I'm just going to share a little bit more in detail what it looks like for us. We do not restrict food intake or calories, and that's some of the criticism that I've also received. We focus on very nutrient dense foods. This doesn't mean deprivation. This doesn't mean he can't have pizza or ice cream. He actually just had ice cream last night. He had pizza on Friday night. Every Friday night is pizza night. Every Saturday night is ice cream night. Things like that. We just use different versions of them, healthier versions, which is what we've always done before this diagnosis. And that's just how we've done it. And so nobody was saying anything about it just because we use almond flour instead of white wheat flour in our pizza dough or something like that. So I think that there's just some clarity maybe that needs to be given around that. And yes, we still do use insulin. We use very small calculated amounts, just what his body needs to keep that range that I showed you, that we keep him in between 70 and 120 is the range. Research shows that anything over 140 causes permanent or long-term organ damage. Obviously, that's a compound effect over time. And so we're not going to freak out if his blood sugar goes over 140 once or twice or 3 times a week, but we're going to keep that 70 to 120 range as our target amount. So we do that with the help of injected insulin, of course, in small amounts. So let's see here. This is the law of small numbers. My son is MDI. He is on his own injected insulin. We do not use a pump. And, as one doctor even told us, you wouldn't get better results with a pump from what we're getting. I know that some people do, and they have great experiences with it, and that works for them. We just don't, and we haven't. We have no interest in it. So he uses 3 different insulins. He uses Tresiba for his basal, and I will fight for that one. They had him on Lantus when he was first diagnosed, and we didn't like that one. So I actually pay cash for all of his insulin, and I have some resources and things like that to share with you on how to lower the cost of insulin in case you're new to this and you haven't heard of those. One of the biggest ones he uses is Novolin R, which is an over-the-counter insulin at Walmart. This one, you can walk up to the pharmacy counter at Walmart and say, I'd like a box of Novolin R pens. I think they have it in vials and things like that too, for the other way, but we do pens. And this is the insulin that we use to dose for protein. Dr. Bernstein's information has calculations on how to do that how many units of our insulin for how many grams of protein and things like that. So I'm not going to give you our calculations for that. You can start with his calculations and do that. And so, for instance, for a meal like tonight, which was just grass-fed ground beef burger patties with raw sharp cheddar on them, and he likes a mixed vegetable, which is broccoli, carrots, cauliflower. And he cooks them up in olive oil and really does a great job with them, and they're delicious. He would do a little bit of regular Novolog. Usually that's about 1.5 units. And then he would do some R, anywhere from 3 to 6 maybe units of R for the protein. And he does, like I said, he does pens. And so, in one day, as far as the Novolog goes, we use the half unit pen. One of the doctors had tried to change us to a different pen because he said, he's too old for this pen. That's only for little kids when they need little amounts. But I fought to keep that one because we found that 1 unit of insulin doesn't really do anything. It has to be at least 1.5 in his body anyway. He was a teenager when he was diagnosed, and he's 19 years old now. But that half unit makes a big difference when you are using such a small amount. And so that's just what we stick with. And that's how we've been able to really dial in on a great targeted dose. So what's the big deal? Why only small amounts of insulin? So, I work with people that have insulin resistance, and the problem with large amounts of insulin, whether it's injected or the body's own insulin that it's making, is that insulin is a fat storage hormone. It stimulates the storage of fat, which leads to a whole host of other problems. Additionally, and this is something that we should really be paying attention to, and this is a concern that we should all have, whether we have type 1 diabetes or not, is that high amounts of insulin in the body leads to the body being less sensitive to it, which leads to insulin resistance. And this can happen in people with type 1 diabetes. They can end up having insulin resistance as well, which is just such a bear to have to deal with. And I don't want that for anyone. The law of small numbers basically means that lower amounts of insulin needed, so lower carbs, lower amounts of insulin, lower spikes and drops. So as some of you already know, Novolog, or those fast-acting insulin, when they're in the hospital diagnosed, a nurse has to sign off on every single dose. Two nurses have to sign off on every single dose before it can be injected, because too much insulin can kill someone. There's been pump failures, or not pump failures, I'm sorry. There has been, but there's been, Dexcom CGMs have been reading wrong and telling a pump that somebody's too high, their blood sugar is too high, and they're not. And it's giving the body too much insulin, and people have died from that. And too much insulin is deadly. But aside from that, is that, if you have a large amount of injected insulin in your body, you are more likely to have scary hypoglycemia situations. We don't have scary hypoglycemia situations because he doesn't have large amounts of insulin injected into his body. If you inject a child with a large amount of insulin for a donut and then they don't eat it, you're in a scary situation. If you inject them for a meal, then you've got a great calculated dosage, but it's a high amount of insulin, and then they go out and jump on the trampoline or ride their bike, their insulin is going to drop massively because, as you know, activity, exercise, things like that activates insulin even more. So with lower amounts of insulin, we have lower amounts of, I need to just brighten up my screen here a little bit. We have lower amounts of hypoglycemia, and we don't have scary ones. So also the cost of insulin, of course, and for some of you that might not be an issue if your insurance pays for it, but we don't know, how long that's going to be or anything like that. And also, one of the concerns for me is, yes, my child is alive because of injected insulin. However, excipients, which are those preservatives and things like that in injected insulin, they do cause cell death. And over time, they will lessen your body's absorption of insulin. So when there's more larger amounts of insulin being injected, that cell death and the poor insulin absorption happens more quickly in the body. So what we eat, like I said, we focus on high quality, nutrient dense proteins. Proteins have pretty much everything you need. Your body gets a lot of just everything out of good quality proteins. So that could be, we love beef. We buy grass-fed beef. We have chickens for eggs. My son likes fish. All sorts of different proteins, chickens, we've had chickens for meat that we've raised and we buy and things like that. And so we like to add healthy fibers and carbs for carbs. These are carbs, but the cool thing about, these kind of vegetable carbs is that they come with fiber, which is good for the body. And as you know, helps slow down the absorption in the body of the carbohydrates in those things. So we do those a lot. And also homemade keto desserts and snacks. We use, Swerve, allulose, stevia, all of those kinds of things for making homemade keto desserts and snacks. And I'm going to share with you some of my favorite resources for recipes and things like that coming up. So just hang tight on that one. I thought I would just make a quick little picture collage of some of the things that we just eat and we eat often. The top left is what's called a sub in a tub. So it's basically just a sub sandwich without the bread, and it's amazing and delicious. I like to add a lot of proteins to salads and things like that. He does love keto yogurts, and we can add nut butters and berries, berries and things like that into them. We're big fans of eggs and things like that. Cheese. Cheese is a great protein, especially if it's a good quality source. The top right is a taco bowl. It's just everything, without the shells or the bread. There are keto options of those too out there, and some of them are really great. Some of them are junk. And some of them I wouldn't never have touched even before my child was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And some of them are okay. The bottom right is pizza. We do pizza every Friday night. Like I said, we have our favorite crust that is completely blood sugar friendly. And, the thing is that, conventional pizza dough and crusts are so bad for anybody, regardless of if they have diabetes or not. And so why not just make it the healthier way, the better way for everybody? So just in case you're trying to understand why we need a dose for protein, if you've never seen this before, this graph was very helpful for me in the beginning when I was trying to understand that, because protein and fat do still raise blood glucose, just not like carbs. And if you look at this graph, you'll see that things like Novolog actually work the same, like the fast acting insulins actually act the same way as carbohydrates do in our body. It works fast, and it comes down fast. So that can be a good match for carbohydrates sometimes, but not for protein and fat. So you might notice that you dose for the carbohydrates in a meal that you're eating, and then 2 to 3 hours later, your blood sugar starts climbing. And you're like, why? I haven't eaten anything. I dosed for that meal. Well, that's the protein or the fat in that. And so when you use a Novolin R insulin for the protein rise, you catch this 2, 3, 4 hour rise that comes later from the protein and the fat. So correcting lows is something I want to share with you how we do it, because you can use anything for it. But in the beginning, because my family hadn't consumed sugar in any of its processed forms for a long time, I wasn't about to introduce that into his diet when he had an autoimmune disease. So I was looking for better ways to help bring up his blood sugar when he would go low. And one of the things that I saw was, we worked on this right from the beginning, and we realized that what was happening was incredible. And so we started giving him this supplement drink called NingXia Red, and it comes in these 2-ounce packets that he can carry around with him. We have a bottle of it in the fridge with a little shot glass that he can dose just the precise amount if he's at home, and then the packets for going about and about. And what we started realizing or just seeing at first was how come every time he started having just these tiny little bit of lows, when we just use a little bit to get it back up because the lows were so mild, was that he ran low after that. And we had to lower his Tresiba amount. And I couldn't figure out why that was happening. And what I started realizing was it was this supplement drink that he was drinking for his lows. And I dug into the research, and there was so much research on this for improving blood glucose that I finally put the pieces together in my head and realized that what we were using to treat his lows was actually lowering the amounts of insulin that his body needed. And it was boosting his immune system and so many things at the same time. So here's just some of the research that I found on this amazing drink. One of the things in it is this wolfberry extract, and some of this research is specifically on wolfberry extract, and some of it is on the actual supplemental drink itself. But there is research showing that wolfberry extract improves the function and recovery of beta cells. And so you can see why I started realizing that this was a huge part of this great blood sugar balance and low amounts of insulin that he was, using. And I started seeing what other people were on for amounts of Tresiba for their basal insulin every day. And I was like, wow, that is so much. That is so much. And I realized that this is such a big part of it. It also has been shown in research to protect liver and kidney tissue, which we know is so important, especially in the long term for those with diabetes. It lowers fasting glucose. So while it raises his blood sugar up a little bit to get him out of the, where he might be starting to trend towards hypoglycemia, it has that initial rise, but then over the next 24 hours, we see that his average blood sugar is lower. It decreases cellular DNA damage, which to me was extremely huge in my priorities for him having an autoimmune disease. 3 times the antioxidants as elderberries, increases energy, improves sleep, and reduces stress, which we know stress equals cortisol, and cortisol in the body equals higher blood sugar. So I had gone through spurts of where I said, you know what, we're going to test this out, and we're going to have you drink 4 ounces a day, and then we would raise it to 8 ounces a day. Now the average intake for people without diabetes, just for general health, is 2 to 4 ounces a day. So I started challenging that and said, what happens if he's just going to drink 8 ounces a day? And it got to the point where it was almost a little bit stressful because we were having to constantly lower his basal insulin. And he's just like, can we just set a standard amount, and that, so that he could stay at his basal amount without having to change that up. So it's really powerful. It's really convenient. The packets, he keeps them in his pack with his insulin when we're out and about, and he can just tear one open and drink it if he's trending low. So we talked about NingXia. So that's a great question. NingXia, we actually just use it for him for when he's trending low. If he doesn't trend low, then we will actually dose, or not really dose for it, but just utilize it when he's been given insulin for a meal, just because we want to make sure that he's getting that every day. So yes, if there's not a hypo or trending low where we need something to bring it up a little bit, and we don't have that opportunity to use NingXia, then we will use it other ways. Yeah. So the what we're giving for lows and then what we're eating for food every day are the biggest factors, but there are some other ones. So I'm going to get into some of these a little bit more in detail. Proper replenishment of electrolytes and minerals is huge. optimizing vitamin D level in the body, which goes along with optimizing minerals, and especially magnesium. Those two they work together. If your body is low in magnesium, which it usually is when you've had high blood sugar, your body doesn't absorb vitamin D very well, so it needs to be paired together. Adequate exercise and muscle mass, of course, as you know, exercise is like insulin. It's like free insulin in the body for anybody. Very important. So is muscle mass. The more muscle mass you have, the more glucose you burn. It's just how it is. One thing that may surprise you is that avoiding synthetic fragrances, which we have done for his whole life, but it's very important that we do that. I have seen situations where we are walking into a place that has very strong synthetic fragrances, and I've seen blood sugar go up. And not just in people with type 1 diabetes, but people without diabetes as well. And I'll share some research on that with you too. Replenishing other key nutrients, additional herbal glucose support, which we'll talk about, and then the environment. So we homeschool. That was a really great thing we had already been doing for many, many years. And it was just something that allowed us the freedom to be able to make sure he was eating well. He wasn't being stressed out. I know that for a lot of kids, blood sugar spikes when they're, rushed out the door and things like that. For people without diabetes, for adults too. So that's one way that I just want to make sure I note that we have managed his blood sugar personally for us too. So like I said, exercise is like free insulin that the body doesn't have to make. 10 minutes, whether you have diabetes or not, after each meal to stabilize it from the carbs is such a great practice. It increases insulin sensitivity for 24 hours after sufficient exercise. So of course, some of you may have noticed where you, we'll get to the point where you're going to say, okay, we're going to be really active for the next 2 days, more so than normal. So we're going to hit it ahead of time and lower the basal insulin, because otherwise, they're going to run low, right? You need at least 30 minutes total daily. And then, for anybody, we have such an epidemic of poor metabolic health. This isn't optional. We do need to have regular, consistent, active movement. So like I said earlier, a March 2021 study found that synthetic fragrance induces insulin resistance and raises A1C. We have seen this over and over on continuous glucose monitoring and other things. So watch your home and body care products for anything on the label that says fragrance or perfume on it. And those need to go. That includes everything: soaps, shampoos, lotions, candles, plug-ins, air fresheners, all of that kind of stuff is going to have a significant impact on your blood sugar. There is a lot of research out there, and I'm going to give you a way to get all of the research that I've compiled on this over the years at the end. So just stick with me. But vitamin D in the body acts, is more powerful than things like metformin. And the doctors don't generally tell you that. So I'm telling you that when you get your vitamin D levels up to very healthy amounts, you're going to lower your risk of everything. And it's also going to improve blood sugar control for anybody. So after seeing the research on this, and one of the things to note too is actually having a serum level of vitamin D in the body at least 50, actually, they said in one study, prevents or would reduce half of the amount of type 1 diagnoses. So that really is a big part of anything autoimmune as well. So we test at home. I have a resource for that. If you want that, you can test with your doctor, ask them to test. But you want to make sure you get it at least bare minimum 50. So vitamin D is something that you can start at any age, For me personally, when I was pregnant with the baby after him, I tested my vitamin D level before I got pregnant, because obviously that's going to be passed down, and babies are so commonly born low in vitamin D nowadays, for a variety of reasons that I won't get into now, and many different factors that are common nowadays. So it's important. It will reduce babies' respiratory risks, their risk of type 1 diabetes, so many things by a significant amount. So getting that serum level at least 50. My son, the last time we tested, he was at 90. So, 50 to 100. Honestly, I would say 70 to 100 is, from research I found, the ideal range. That's a therapeutic range. And again, like I said, you need to have magnesium in the body sufficiently in order for the body to be able to absorb the vitamin D. Magnesium is actually the most important cofactor of vitamin D. So, if you're like, my levels aren't coming up, it could be a magnesium issue. Probiotics have been huge for us. Obviously, there's a lot to do with gut health and autoimmune and things like that. So we've always worked on that with him. And there's another thing that he's taken since the beginning. So I have my own line of supplements, and I work with a manufacturer who creates them. They are one of the leading manufacturers. You may have heard about them. They're called Claire Labs. SFI now, I think they changed their name. But anyway, so when he was diagnosed, I started doing some research on some of the most powerful herbal plant things to help with it. And I found these ingredients, and we've combined them in a supplement called Glucose Control that my son has been on since he was diagnosed. And there's lots of really cool research on that I will share with you later. So adequate vitamin D acts like insulin in the body. It is more effective than metformin, increases insulin sensitivity by 54%. Again, this is when the body is sufficient in it. It greatly reduces the risk of isolate death and in type 1 diabetes diagnoses, like I said. So closer to 100 is optimal for those with type 1 diabetes. Test, don't guess. I have so many people, they're like, it's probably fine. It's not. I can count on one hand, after hundreds of testing over the years, for people, my clients, myself, my family members, who have actually been sufficient without testing and optimizing their dosage that they're doing, and their magnesium levels and the other things that we talked about. So we talked about magnesium. It's not just important for working with the body to absorb vitamin D, it's also required for both proper glucose utilization and insulin signaling. Magnesium is very easily and quickly depleted in the body with things like caffeine, sugar, high blood sugar, stress, all of those kinds of things. So that's a really important one that we supplement with as well. One of the things you need to know, for a variety of reasons, is that supplementing with electrolytes, that means adequate sodium, and most electrolytes do not have adequate sodium and potassium combined, are required for reducing spikes from cortisol. So when the adrenals are stressed, they struggle to maintain the electrolyte balance. The adrenals produce a hormone called aldosterone, which helps balance the electrolytes in the body. When the adrenals are stressed, which, as you can imagine, they are with type 1 diabetes, because it's part of the endocrine system, just like the adrenals are a part of it. They're all connected. Cortisol can raise blood sugar. When the body is stressed, it does struggle more with electrolyte balance. Also, with a low-carb diet, it's important to add in some more electrolytes, just because when there's a larger consumption of carbs, the body actually holds on to sodium in a way that it shouldn't, but it's a protective mechanism that the body's trying to do to maintain homeostasis. And when those carbs are eliminated, the body is able to just sort of relax and say, we don't need to hold on to all of this sodium anymore. So you do want to make sure you add that in. If you notice a blood sugar spike from heat, exercise in the heat, things like that, that could just be because the body needs to be prepped with adequate electrolytes ahead of time. One of the things that I get asked a lot, and that I see in other people just struggling, especially upon diagnosis, and they call it burnout, right? Diabetes burnout, is how do we manage the mental health side of it? I know that life for me stopped basically when he was diagnosed, and it was the only thing I could do was just figure out how to accept this diagnosis for life, and just that whole mental health side of it, and I know that some of you can relate to that. And one of my favorite words of hope and encouragement have been from 2 Corinthians 1:4, that says, God comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. And so that is a huge part of my mission in sharing our story. You have probably heard the saying, you've been given this mountain to show others how to climb it. And that's really basically the same thing. And that's my mission with all of this. And so that really does help us see purpose in it and give us hope and encouragement when it's sometimes hard. And the other side of that is truly optimizing diet and blood sugar. That reduces so much of the mental load that doesn't have to come with type 1 diabetes. I want to show you something. I've been talking about this for years on Healthy Families for God, and it doesn't matter if there's a diagnosis of type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes or no diagnosis and seemingly perfect health. High blood sugar has a negative impact on everyone's mental health. Dementia, as some of you know, is now called type 3 diabetes. It's associated with a shrinkage of the hippocampus and the amygdala because of insulin resistance. So there's that insulin resistance that we see causing mental health issues. Higher blood sugar has been proven to raise the risk of developing dementia by 40%. And again, like I said, people without diabetes have blood sugar spikes every day from everyday foods. There's been a link known between sugar consumption and neuropsychiatric illness since at least 1966. This isn't new news. No amount of updated research is going to change the fact that sugar is detrimental to our mental health. 85% of patients in one study recovered from mental health issues once sugary caffeinated drinks were eliminated. So to me, this isn't just about getting a targeted amount of insulin and other things to stabilize blood sugar. This is about having good mental health from not putting junk into the body, regardless of the effect or the outcome of blood sugar, whether we can, just dial in on it with the correct amount of insulin and not see a spike. It still has effects on the body and the mind. And that's why we hadn't been consuming it for so long before his diagnosis even. So I have talked tonight about some of the resources that I'll have for you. I have a huge list of resources. I have the links to the research that we talked about tonight that go much more in depth about things like magnesium and which ones to take and how much, and why it needs to be taken, and how to test your vitamin D levels at home, and what other supplements should you be taking. Some of my favorite sources for recipes of cookbooks that we utilize all of the time. Ways to get insulin for less, because like I said, we pay cash for all of his prescriptions for his insulin and for his Dexcom and things like that. So if you would like that list of resources, I have it ready to go. You can send me an email, sjpuff@healthyfamiliesforgod.com, and I will get that to you as soon as possible. I will also include the link to the replay if you'd like that. That'll be in there as well. So feel free to email me and take a screenshot of this if you need to remember that really ridiculously long email. So I just wanted to thank you for joining me tonight. I do hope it was helpful. I know that there's so much more when it comes to type 1 diabetes, but I just really hope that it was helpful. You are welcome to share this too when the link to the replay comes out for anybody that you think it might be helpful for. You can contact me anytime. If you're just like, I'm burnt out, I need prayer, whatever it is, feel free to email me. The morning spike, we actually know a couple of things. We talked about electrolytes. So my son takes a supplement. Where's it? That has vitamin C. It's called an adrenal cocktail pills. They're on my website, healthyfamiliesforgod.com. in the supplement store. It has sodium, potassium, and vitamin C, and he takes it at night. That helps reduce that morning spike because that morning spike is from cortisol. Some cortisol is healthy in the morning, of course. So we're not trying to stop cortisol. We're trying to just stop the negative effects of it on the body. Another thing that we do is just knowing that now there's a difference. There's that morning spike, whether it's from breakfast or just from general slow waking up, or there's that foot on the floor syndrome where it happens immediately upon waking up. My son doesn't have that. But just, as the morning cortisol kind of starts to wake up, it might be trending upward. And so he uses R protein for that. We talked about the R protein because it works slower in the body. And so that he will dose for his protein for breakfast as well as a little bit for that morning rise. So let's see if you guys have any other questions. You can pop them in the chat and we'll get to them. Otherwise, we'll end that and get the recording out. All right, I think we're good. You guys feel free to contact me anytime with questions. I am here for you. I hope that was helpful. And I will just be, sharing more. I'll share the link. It'll be in my newsletter too. So, yes, heavy metals is a good one too. Magnesium, if it upsets the stomach, it could be the form, it could be the type. We might just need to, hone in on that. It might need to be a different form. Heavy metals, yes, we test heavy metals too when we test vitamin D sometimes. But yeah, that's a big topic too. We don't do heavy metal detoxes. That's too stressful on the body. We support the body's natural detox pathways so that the body's not building them up and things like that. So great question. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you guys being here. Contact me anytime, like I said, and I will talk to you guys later. Have a great night.